Welcome to Mapping 2025. My name is Trent Booth, joined by Wayne Wagner Jr. and Nate Wagner. We're looking forward today to walking you through some thoughts on how to make 2025 your best year ever. Several thoughts today. We're going to walk you through 6 main areas of life, a bit of a wheel of life. We're going to walk you through a deeper dive into some of those sections there with both Wayne and Nate. We're really excited to join each of you. Just to buy a bit of an introduction here, and then we're going to get right into the content. Our thinking today is we just want to informally record and capture some content that would help you figure out how to do an extended planning session. You can do it solo. You can certainly do it with loved ones, but the idea is to give you a bit of a framework, things that we've all done in terms of how to take stock of where we've been and take some inventory on the previous year or beyond, and then look into the future and plant some seeds for dreams, for things that we'd like to experience in the future. My name is Trent Booth. Again, I'm the founder of Veritas Leadership Group. And after pioneering over at Vector Marketing Corporation, their leadership development department, we launched Veritas Leadership Group with an eye towards just trying to have more of a global scale. We do executive coaching, we do one-on-one, we do some group coaching as well. And most of that one-on-one work is a lot of the impetus behind how we came up with some of the content. I'm going to hand things over to Wayne and Nate to introduce themselves briefly, and then we're going to jump right in there. Mr. Wagner, tell us a little bit about you.
Take it away, Nate.
So I live up in the West Michigan area, and privileged to be able to be involved in some leadership coaching, some consultation, and some professional counseling with a number of different pastors and non-for-profit executives, helping them navigate some of their work, but also personal, professional worlds, as well as the relational dynamics that they experience as they're trying to lead out the organizations they work with. And so this, for me, is an opportunity to take some of the things that have been just a regular part of that dialogue. And as you think about evaluating this past year and you think about trying to maximize this year ahead of us, there's some strategic decisions, but also some real reflection that's got to happen to increase self-awareness and then opportunity to move forward. So excited to be able to be a part of this and excited about what this can offer on a number of different environments for the leaders that we all get to serve.
Cool. Thanks, Nate and Trent, both. I'm Wayne Wagner. I'm president of Visionary Wealth Management and host of a podcast and a serial entrepreneur at heart. So I own all or parts of bits and pieces of a bunch of different companies and a bunch of different industries. The day job at Visionary Wealth Management is helping families accelerate wealth. And so, what we've found over time is that when we can add in value, pull the Trent Booths and the Nate Wagners of our world into our sphere, man, we start to get acceleration in thinking, acceleration in how people are showing up in their spheres. And I mean, Visionary is very pragmatically, we're trying to accelerate wealth. But before, wealth is a trailing indicator of thinking and action. And the work that Trent and Nate do actually motivates people to new thinking, better thinking, and then motivates them to action. And then once we can, and so when we can add that to the value as value added to our clients, we can actually get the downstream effect of wealth acceleration. But it all starts with the work really that Nate and Trent are doing, because that's where fundamental change starts. Is it starts in the mind and it starts in the body in terms of thinking and action. So today I'm like super excited about this because I know Nate, Trent, and I spend time individually and with our families doing year-end planning, but we get questions all the time about, well, what does that look like? And what kind of questions do you ask? And how do you normalize hard conversations and all these kinds of things? And so today, this is just going to be an amazing time to just unpack some of that. Like, what does that look like for us? And, what might that look like for you as a listener? So.
And Nate, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to open our time up in prayer in just a moment. But in terms of context, friends, Wayne and I met at Sovereign Grace Church in Marlton, New Jersey. I'm going to say about 12 years ago. It's about 2012, and have become very good friends since then. I do executive coaching for his team, and just been, a brother in arms for years with him. And that was how I got to meet Nate, who I would say, in terms of celebrating his philosophies and his thoughts. He's coming out of years of ministering, which I've been a pastor in a past life. It's on the resume. And so I love Nate's heart for things. Both Wayne and I mostly function on a day-to-day in the world. We wouldn't say that our businesses are necessarily Christian businesses, but we do love the Lord with all of our heart. And this is a bit of a different context for us today, where we get to actually talk very freely, very open, as we made the decision that we would lead this webinar with an eye towards certainly making it niche within our Christian values and welcoming everybody that would like to check in, but at the same time be able to talk very openly about about our faith and how that guides us on a day-to-day. So without further ado, Nate, if you would open us in prayer, we'll be ready to dive right in.
Absolutely. Father, I'm just grateful for the privilege of doing this together. God, we think about the role that you've given us as stewards of our experiences, of the resources that you've blessed us with, the time, talents, and treasures. God, our great desire is that we would be able to anticipate maximizing those things in the future for the blessing of those in our sphere, for the glory of your great name. And God, we just ask that this time would be one that is well served in that direction. We love you. We're grateful for the privilege of doing this, and we're excited about the opportunity to collectively bring this content together and to anticipate how it can serve as a springboard for 2025 and beyond in the lives of so many leaders and the ripple effect that can have in their families, their organizations, and beyond. Thank you, Father. In the precious name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. So I'm going to have each Wayne and Nate introduce a little bit of just what to expect today. Here's what we're going to be covering. In a moment, I'm going to walk you through the Wheel of Life. I did not create the Wheel of Life. I've enjoyed using it for probably, I'm going to say about 25 years at this point, and it has served me and just helped raise awareness, help me take stock of where things are at, and set some goals with regards to where I'd like to be going forward. It's really, in many ways, helped me to come up with my true north. So what is it that I value? What is it that I'm excited about? And we'll be able to use that tool, the true north exercise, in addition with the Wheel of Life, to be able to document some of the core values that you have and what winning life would look like for you. And as you define that, in my experience, people invariably start to narrow the gap between what they'd like to be doing, what they feel called to do, and their actual behaviors. So that's where we'll be spending some time with me. I'm not going to do the deep dive into things like finances and relationships. We've got two experts here that are going to be able to do that. So Wayne is going to be able to take us home. Nate, tell us a little bit about some of the content you're going to cover today.
There is no other relationship that you have in your life, if you are a married individual, than into that relationship that you have with your spouse. And so we're going to spend some time thinking about how do we ask great questions? How do we evaluate the overall health of that and anticipate what we can do in the future? What are some of the topics that you want to be able to have as just a normative dialogue within your family, with your kids and beyond? And what are some of the topics that need to come up in those spaces? And then what are some of the building blocks of building both healthy families, but then obviously as that moves from your family into the businesses and the environments you step into with the teams that you work with, what are some of the core building blocks for those spaces as well? And so we'll spend some time dialoguing through that with the idea of being able to do some evaluative stuff on where we've been, but also how do we maximize as we go into 2025 and to really just steward all of what you've been blessed with, but also the experiences, the good, the bad, the highs and the lows, and leverage that as you move forward in 2025 and beyond.
I always love hearing Nate and the questions that he's got and diving deep into some of the philosophies. Friends, you're in for a treat there coming up with Nate. I'm looking forward to learning from you as well and guiding our relationship. How about you, Wayne? I know you're an expert in financial matters, but I love so much of your experience that is well beyond that. So what are you walking us through today?
Yeah, so I think we're going to be, so in terms of content we're going to cover, the stuff I'm going to cover is going to be in the weeds and at 35,000 feet. So 35,000 feet, existential questions that we each need to be working through and coming back to and rehearsing and reviewing how we're thinking and how our thinking is evolving over time. And then all the way down in the weeds, covering 10 financial questions to start every year to evaluate your progress toward your financial goals and where you are. So it's really, I'm going to be kind of taking the high road and the really low road. And then sitting here as the dumbest guy in the room for the whole rest of this thing. So.
And we want to give a shout out to Dan Keever, who's our producer here today. Dan, if you wouldn't mind taking us to the Wheel of Life, we're going to just dive right in. This is a tool that I first became aware of. I read a book called Perpetual Motivation in about 1996, 97. Dave Duran is the author of that book, and we've adapted this since. I know that Dave didn't create this either, but so not certain in terms of where the actual origin of the Wheel of Life is. This is simply designed to be a tool to help you identify where we're at. And my encouragement when you do this isn't designed to be an aggregate career lifetime assessment of where I'm at. This is just today. In this case, the day of recording is a certain Friday in November. And I just wanted to take a snapshot today of where we're at in 6 major areas. And what was encouraging to me, as I think when I read this as a man in his young 20s, I felt overwhelmed a lot and trying to figure out the work-life balance. I was just thinking that there was dozens of topics that I should be an expert in, and I was becoming keenly aware that I wasn't an expert in many of them. And I wondered how many I was really doing well in. So to see that there's really 6 or a half dozen, if you will, and I've seen versions of the wheel that might have 8. We're just picking 6 here today because I can wrap my brain around a half dozen. The thinking is, if I can knock out these half dozen things and really pay attention to winning the day, winning the week, month, year in each of these areas, a lot of everything else is going to be taken care of. I think one of the other bullets I would encourage people to be aware of as we dive into the Wheel of Life is that one area, one topic affects all the other topics. And as we start to assess how we're doing, if you want to start to level up and do the deep dive, let's start to ask questions about, all right, how does my faith intersect with my family? What does God have to say about my finances? What does God have to say about my physical health? And so on and so forth. So we want to get the level up by trying to consider how one area affects each of the other areas. On a scale of 1 to 10, and we do have a handout that accompanies this. We'll hopefully include that with either the email or maybe we can even post a link and post. But the idea of being able to access the PDF, so you could do this on your own. You might even pause this now and take an opportunity to assess where you're at on your own wheel. If you were to print this off and just take a look and say, all right, if 10 out of 10 success in my family, is 10 is awesome, I'm crushing it. 1 is this is the worst I could possibly imagine. Where am I currently at with regards to family? And we're going to do a deeper dive in just a moment in terms of how to assess how we would measure that. And this is a completely subjective thing, but as best you can, try to assess, give yourself a number. How am I doing currently on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being wild success, 1 being not very good. Let's also then, and a lot of people will draw a bit of a circle there. So if it's an 8, you might kind of draw a circle there and start that arc right around the 8. How am I doing with finances? The reality is we're probably not the same number in all of the different areas. But if we talk about personal finance, how am I doing with wealth? Am I managing my money well? Am I aware of what's going on? Am I hitting the ATM like I won the lottery? How am I doing with regards to my finances? Let's assess how we're doing with regards to physical health. Am I getting enough sleep? How's my nutrition? What type of exercise am I engaging in or not? How am I doing with regards to physical health on this day? Education vocation goes beyond my work or my career. This is my personal development. This is my growth. This is why am I here on planet Earth? What am I designed to do? And am I living in that? Am I thriving in my education / vocation? In terms of ministry, social contributions is usually the label that we'll use outside of a church context there. But with regards to ministry, what am I doing to give back to society?
Yeah.
What am I doing to invest into my church or into my local community? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very much, 10 being, I'm absolutely crushing it. And don't be afraid to give yourself a 10. I know the audience that we've got here. Don't be afraid to give yourself a 10 in case as you level up and get more sophisticated, today's 10 might be tomorrow's 8 as you continue to learn and grow. And there's nothing wrong with that. The key is here to try and come up with a fair assessment, give yourself a ton of grace as we're going through. And in terms of faith, you know the things that you ought to do. How am I doing with regards to my walk with the Lord? Is it going well? And what would be some evidence of that Let's take a snapshot for today. If we could go through, Dan, the next slide, once we've got a basic assessment.
Hey, Trent, can I
Go
jump
ahead,
in for a
Wayne.
second? So, two things here that I think that are really important. First of all, this is a wheel of life. It's not the circle of life. And a wheel is something that's vertical that goes around. You pointed out very astutely, I think, on the front end of this, that this is a moment in time. And so it's something that literally you don't do this once and then don't touch it for 5 years. This is something that if you've never done coaching, if you've never done personal development, you might want to do this on a weekly basis to start. You might want to do it on a monthly basis to start, where you evaluating, because as you make small decisions and pump up one side, you might see that your wheel starts to find a bit more balance. And if you imagine this wheel going around or along the ground, you might start out with a couple of 2s or 3s and a couple of 8s or 9s. And if you thought about that wheel rolling along the ground, it's going to be a pretty bumpy, uneven ride that you're getting out of that wheel. And so part of the reason it's a wheel is that we can take steps to bring balance to life. Now, that doesn't mean that we say, hey, I'll just stabilize at a 2 on every area, and I'll just do the reductio absurdum minimum base level I can possibly do to get by and not have my wife leave me and my kids hate me and lose my job. It's hey, how do we pump more? If that's where you're starting today, it's where you're starting. We all have to start somewhere, but then we can start to inject some air into that tire and start to move up the scale as we take some incremental improvements. And so I think that process of A, this is a moment in time, and B, this is an opportunity to measure improvement over time is crucial as we think about this.
It's agreed. As subjective as this exercise is, the more often that you do it, that does bring some objectivity to it as well. Mm-hmm. It'll bring some perspective. So just capture today where you're at. And the encouragement is got to bring some grace to yourself. I've never met somebody that is satisfied and has 8s all the way around the whole wheel. Never, not once. Yep. I'm an executive coach, and I'm not sitting at an 8 on all of these levels here today. And there's various reasons around that. And again, while it's a completely subjective exercise of just assessing where I'm at here today, we do want to guide you a little deeper in terms of how to bring a little more sophistication to it. So, for example, if I feel right now that I'm a 6 in regards to family, there is a deeper process here. And we've got 4 steps here that can guide you to come up with a bit of a rubric for yourself with regards to how would I do this differently next time. And it will give you some ideas of, hey, if I'm currently a 6, what would a 7 look like? What would an 8 look like? Are there some quick hits, air that I can inject into this tire so we can get this tire rolling a little better than a 2 on one side and 8 on the other? So some quick steps here. 1, not necessarily quick, but if we walk you through them quickly, step 1 would be to publish some presuppositions. And these are simply shortcut assumptions based on how the world works. So what is it that you believe? And documenting some of your core beliefs in each area that are hopefully, again, guided by faith and guided by scripture. As we consider different aspects of each of the topics, how do we come to believe the things that we believe in these areas? There are probably some beliefs that no longer serve you, or perhaps that you've held on to for a season, but just are not healthy. So I'm gonna punt on those and see if I can't bring every thought captive to the Lord and level up. Ultimately, the goal is, of course, to line up our actions with what we value. We want to identify what good would look like and start to engage in better actions on a day-to-day. A step that in executive coaching I find a lot of people skip is establishing reasons. And Jim Rohn would say, when the promise is clear, the price is easy. So if we understand why I should pay attention to my finances on a day-to-day basis, I've got a much better shot of starting that activity and then sustaining it over time. If the why is not clear, it's very easy for me to start something and then just not stick to it. So to give yourself a shot of not only starting this process, but continuing it later, don't skimp on reasons why this is important to me. In terms of self-assessment, we already have done a version of that. If you walk through that wheel of life for yourself and just kind of drew some arcs, drew a bit of a wonky circle, how am I currently doing? And again, we need to find that balance between that sober honesty, just going through and how am I really doing, and grace. Just because I'm here right now doesn't mean I have to be here, even in a week or certainly in a year. But again, without intentionality, most of us aren't doing the things that we know intrinsically that we ought to do. So rating yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being crushing it, again, 1 being no good. And we're going to continue to level up. Some of us might even read books on various topics so we can continue to level up what our current 10 might be, just a 7 next year. And then finally, we do come up with a bit of an action plan. So why don't we skip down to the next slide here, and we'll just start with one particular area. When we start considering questions with regards to, like, let's say our faith, what do I believe about my faith? And what did I believe growing up? What did I believe growing up that still serves me today? What did I believe growing up that perhaps doesn't serve me today? Some things that I might need to shift on. What do I believe now with regards to faith? Why is this important? Why is this relevant to me? And as we start to ask questions like that, we should be coming up with those reasons and documenting those. When my wife and I do this together, we'll do it separately and then come back and exchange some thoughts and ideas. And sometimes I like sentences that she's got, and I'll copy those, and then that becomes part of mine. We've synthesized one that is kind of ours as a family, or as a couple, I should say. And but starting separately allows us to kind of get some different creativity there. In terms of assessment, how am I currently doing, and how would I know? And a lot of the times there are, and we want to avoid, on one sense, the performance trap, where I can know, quote unquote, that I'm doing well because I'm doing the things. Of course, when we're talking about a Christian context, it's not just the things that I'm doing. God cares more about who I am and how I'm doing than necessarily what I'm doing. However, I think it would be crazy to put forth that without some fruits, without some actual action to back up my philosophies, my thoughts, without actions, it doesn't mean anything here. So I want to invite some other voices here for a second. Nate and Wayne, what are some of the things that we should be considering here as we evaluate and try to do a deeper dive with regards to our faith?
I'll speak to the faith thing in just a second. I was thinking about Wayne's discussion on the wheel side of this, and there's so often that we operate with a flat tire where we just feel like we're just not getting traction. We're not getting momentum, and it's hard to identify it. And I think if we're not willing to do this kind of an evaluation, we find ourselves struggling to get the momentum we want, and we can't figure out where it's coming from, which means we start to attribute it to something that may not have anything to do with the real problem. And we just find ourselves frustrated perpetually. I think from the faith side of it, this willingness to just evaluate, am I still living according to my own personal values? Am I engaging this honestly? Are we still, as a family and our married life in the community that I'm a part of, is it still something that we are operating consistently in that spaces? And the truth is, we all know that drift is a natural phenomenon, that vision leaks, drift happens, and that passionate, fervent, spiritual life that we desire, many times what we're doing works against it. It's hard to be a passionate Christ follower. Sometimes it's hard to have a vibrant marriage. Sometimes it's hard to just be a healthy person when we're operating in those spaces and really trying to maximize the work that we're doing. And so reevaluating where we're at from a faith perspective. Am I stepping into a space where there's a genuine connection with Jesus? Am I relying on the work of the Spirit? Am I trying to perform to define my worth and my value? Or is my identity, my significance coming from a place where it's much more secure than that because of who I am in Christ? There's so many elements of this faith journey that sometimes we put it in an autopilot, and as a result, it starts to shrink down and ultimately doesn't allow for it to serve as the springboard and really the catalyst for so much of the other things that we need to evaluate and actually go to pursue in life.
It's good. I mean, one of the things I'm picking up here, Nate, is that if I'm doing well in my faith, you could probably see some evidence of that. So, for example, most believers would say that reading your Bible on a regular basis would be an integral part of your faith walk, right? So if I've got daily devotions in terms of something, a box I should be checking on the daily.
Sure.
Right. Now, certainly there's a deeper version of that, which is, okay, am I really robustly pursuing the Lord? Am I not just speaking to him? Am I listening? Am I doing the deep dive in scripture? Am I not just checking a box, listening to an audible, scripture reading on the way to work? Am I actually diving deep into the word? Am I actually praying? Am I actually praying with my wife on a daily basis? The reality is, if I'm checking that box, that one box will fix a lot of the other boxes,
Sure.
right? So often when I'm stepping and going, man, I'm a mess on this area, this area, this area. To your point earlier, Nate, if I were to just pray daily, read the word, and pray with my wife daily, a lot of those other things, we tighten up the gap in a lot of those other areas.
And this is where the interdependence, and we'll get to this in a little bit too, but there's such an interdependence on my own mental, emotional health and my own spiritual health. Those two things are relied on each other. And so the research suggests that if I spend 12 minutes a day in a prayerful posture, and I'm coming before the Lord in prayer 12 minutes a day over the course of 8 weeks, you can see that show up on brain scans of how that changes the brain itself. That's an astounding reality, that if those things are a regular part of my daily ritual, how much that impacts my psychological, emotional well-being. And you can imagine how much that sets the stage for me to be able to be sharp and to be really well suited for the different environments that I step into. The other piece of this for me, though, is Gary Thomas wrote a book, Sacred Pathways, where he lays out 9 different ways in which we have the ability to connect with God. Part of it's personality, but part of it is just the way in which God meets us spiritually. And for some, it very much is in that devotional study process. For others, it's out in nature. For others, it's through music and other kinds of environments. And I do think having an awareness of how do I connect with God in the most intimate way, where it's not just informational, but it's a genuine intimacy that can be crafted. I do think we need to have a better awareness of our own spiritual makeup and how we're designed to connect with God in the best way possible as we try to lay out kind of what this looks like for us going forward.
So I do want to invite Wayne's voice in just a moment here. Hopefully one of the things that you're picking up, though, friends, is that each of us right now have a level 10 version understanding of what your faith should look like. All of us have right now. And again, it's super subjective. However, you've got a level 10. And many of us will start to almost have this false belief that I have to read a book.
Sure.
I have to go to a seminar to level up in my faith. And the reality is, in my experience, if you were to simply inventory what is my current 10 out of 10 that I understand look like, we don't have a knowledge problem a lot of the time. We have a behavior problem. I know the things I ought to do, and I'm just not doing them. And I know things I should not do, and here I find myself doing those things.
Sounds like you're quoting scripture, Trent.
You know, it's fascinating. I should even get addresses here. So the idea of there are certain things daily, weekly, monthly, etc. And let me just hit that real quick, and then we'll come to Wayne. The idea of, so weekly, I don't need to necessarily go to church daily, but I need to go weekly. I need to be seen. I need to be known by other believers. I have gifts that they need, that they're entitled to from me. So weekly, yes, on my, what do I need to do weekly to know that I'm winning in my faith is I need to be a part of a church that I'm attending weekly. Monthly, I might need to take a deeper dive, right? So if I'm doing the daily devotion time, what is it monthly that we're doing to go a little deeper in our faith? Is there a little deeper family devotion time or worship time where we've got some music and we're praying together? You know, that might not be a daily or even weekly thing as a family, but monthly, boy, could that serve us? Sure. Quarterly, does it make sense for us to get a little extended time away to go deeper in how am I doing with regards to faith? I know on my list, annually getting away with other men to be able to pray and to be prayed for and to be, again, to know and to be known and go a little deeper. A spiritual retreat is something that I've had on my list for 25 years at this point. Some years it happens, some years it doesn't, but it's on my list. If I'm at my best, annually we are going and doing a deeper dive with regards to our faith there. It deserves that. Let me also say this. It was only because of the Wheel of Life that I started mixing in other books in terms of my personal growth and leadership. So I was stuck in a bit of a rut in my 20s where I was reading only books on business and on leadership. And I wasn't reading books on going deeper in the faith or deeper into theology or deeper into Dietrich Bonhoeffer's life. So by identifying, I'm like, hey, if I'm crushing it at work, but I'm not reading books on all these other topics, I'm probably going to find myself upside down or really awesome in one area and weaker in others. And that just wasn't okay for me. So I wanted to start mixing in other books that could help me grow in my faith. And I wasn't doing it for this, but in reading books that were helpful for my faith, they absolutely helped in my personal leadership. They absolutely helped in my family and my ability to be a better dad and husband. They absolutely helped with regards to my finances. Brushing up on my theology absolutely has helped me in terms of ministry and giving back and why I do that. So my encouragement, in case if this is all you got today, read more books on not just leadership, mix in some other stuff on physical health, on theology, and going deeper. All right, Wayne, what are some of your thoughts here as we deep diving into faith?
Yeah, I think you have said a couple of things that really resonated with me. One of them is that the reason we go to church is this idea of knowing and being known. And I want to overlay that with something that when we're doing the wheel of life, if you really want to get a read, if you're feeling insecure in how you're judging yourself or how you're grading yourself, you should have 2 or 3 or 4 relationships where you are known and the others, where you could go to those people, a spouse, someone in your church, someone that you're an accountability partner with, somebody at work that you're really close with, where you can go and ask for a score from them and juxtapose that against yourself. And that will be that may be humbling. But in a world where social media and all that kind of stuff just seems to validate us wherever we happen to be, however we happen to be showing up, having people that know us and that we know and where we have the ability to pour into one another and hold one another accountable, say, hey, I think I'm an 8 in this. Ask your wife and she'll say, no, 2.5 would be pushing it, buddy. So, I mean, there's
it does work both ways though, Wayne, doesn't it? Because I've had times where I'm like, I feel like a 3, and Christy's been like, I think you're doing a 6, hon. Like, she's
absolutely,
been kind there, right?
Absolutely. And the first time we did this with our kids when our kids were like, I don't know, 9 and 12. And it was one of the first times that we did an annual 2-day planning event, which trying to corral a 9 and 12-year-old into 2 days of working on a year was like trying to herd cats on steroids. So, but during that period of time, we just said, hey, 1 to 10, how is your relationship with each other person in the family? And man, we got some stuff that was, hey, I think we're an 8. I think we're a 2. What? You think we're a 2? And, and then unpacking some of that. And that led to, but when we can create in a safe space, a safe environment to be able to accurately grade one another on these things and evaluate our relationship or evaluate how you see your spouse or child or someone, accountability person, actually showing up in the area that they're asking for the score. And then not be, well, I'm just going to be angry and I'm going to go take my marbles and go away. But, I'm going to sit there in that feeling of shame and judgment to feel the weight of this because I want to change. I want this score to go up and I want to show up in the world as a higher score than how I currently am.
I'm sorry.
And how I show up is in some sense, I mean, I can have it in my own head what that score is, but when I ask another person and give them authority to speak to me about what that score is, that can be humbling, but it can also be so life-giving. Because when that can be, and crucial, when even that low score can be given with grace. Hey, brother, I wouldn't give you a 7 here. I'd give you a 3. Here's why. And not feel the need to justify or validate or dismiss. You just say, no, I hear that. And that's, you're telling me how I'm showing up. I have a perception of how I'm showing up, but you're telling me how I actually am showing up. And that's actually more valuable to me and the person I want to become.
Yeah, it's biblical for us to assess where we're at, to soberly consider where we actually are and to see if we can't nudge that needle forward. Thoughts, Nate?
Yeah, again, one of the greatest concerns when you start talking about evaluating your own personal faith journey is that it becomes so shame-based so quickly, right? Like that we put ourselves on this continuum where we start to do just a kind of a binary approach to it. It's like I am or I'm not, all of those kind of things. And I think part of what we're saying here is that this has to be a recognition of the power of the gospel, the immensity of the grace that we've been extended, and the ability to deconstruct that shame and allow this to be something that we evaluate. But my sense of worth, my sense of purpose in the world, and ultimately my sense of where I am in my standing with God has nothing to do with my performance and nothing to do with the score that I come up with here. It has everything to do with how do I move towards him in a way that allows my heart, my mind to be encouraged, to be supported, and ultimately increase the performance in the other areas of my life because of the foundational things that are being put in place, and ultimately the sense of confidence and security that I walk around with, where the highs don't go to my head and the lows don't go to my heart, where I can step into that space and show up consistently because of that. The other side of it is that there's a term that's called emotional math, where I tend to evaluate my performance based on the circumstances and my motives, and other people tend to evaluate me based on connecting my performance to my character, right? And so I think in some ways it's being able to deconstruct that and recognize that people are going to tend to look at us sometimes more objectively, but other times they have a hard time assessing it. And so we need to be able to invite them into that and to have the kind of conversation that allows for a fuller, richer way of interacting on that, simply because I think we are blind to our own deficiency sometimes, and other people are evaluating us from a different lens than I think we think that we're evaluating ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So coming back to the slides, we, in case you're looking at these 6 sections going, are we going to spend equal time? We're not on all the sections. We're more trying
to be here
to
for 18 and a half hours. We're doing a marathon.
At least the overview of one to give you a sense of how deep you could go into all 6 of these different areas. I'm really just going to hit one more, and we're going to really go to Nate quickly here. But the thinking is, when people look at the True North exercise or trying to unpack this wheel of life on a deeper level and assessing where they're at, coming up with those presuppositions, how am I doing and what's my plan going forward? I encourage them. There's 2 ways to do it, right? At least if I oversimplify. One is do the deep dive in a linear fashion. Just give yourself as much time as you need. And you can see where, wow, this could take a couple of days. This could be designed to be a document I continually revisit over a lifetime, right? And would it ever be completely done? I don't think so, right? So rather than be overwhelmed with that side of it, I've encouraged people to take 10 minutes per section for the first treatment. Give yourself 10 minutes per section, just quickly. How am I doing? What do I believe? What do I need to do on a day-to-day, week-to-week, etc.? Because part of the gospel truth is, as we soberly assess, I believe that awareness is a gift. So even if we're missing, there's an opportunity for us to improve and to grow in that area. This would be a terrible exercise if I was a 3 today on any one of these sections, and that's what I'm handcuffed to for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. This would be cruel. In fact, this is designed to not be cruel. It's designed to do the opposite. It's designed to help you identify, become consciously aware of some areas of opportunity, either that are already embedded in your own awareness, even if we haven't thought about it for a minute, and or what do you sense that the Lord is calling you to in terms of leveling up in these different areas. So we did the deep dive on faith. If we could go to ministry for just a moment, and each of these are a little bit color-coded there. We did give ministry the yellow color because we want to brighten the world of those around us. We want to make the world a sunnier place, and we're not just here for us. We're here to invest into others. And the big 3 when it comes to ministry there, or social contributions is the other label that I'll use for this a lot, is we've got time, we've got talent, and we've got treasure. That is not just ours to keep, it's ours to be able to also activate for the kingdom. And the Lord is making a claim on all 3 of those in my life. So what do I believe about my ministry growing up? What do I believe today? Again, establishing some reasons. Why is ministry important to me? Why is it worth my time to invest into? And I would say this, hopefully, if you're watching this and you've experienced the blessing of being a blessing to others, when you've poured yourself out in ministry, you recognize that the benefit isn't just in the moment. There is I would say, an intrinsic benefit for us when we are being utilized as the Lord has wired us. So, for example, if I'm ministering to others, sometimes people will apologize, be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. This month seems so heavy to you." Let's say, for example, having a divorce in my background, when I'm ministering to a young man and he's like, "Hey, I'm going through this divorce. This is really hard. Being able to encourage and help this young man get unstuck is encouraging for me. The fact that the Lord is making beauty out of ashes, a difficult season in my life, and using that to be able to bring empathy, to be able to see this person in this moment. This would be an example where ministry, yes, I'm called to do it and to serve, and it's a blessing to be a blessing. There is encouragement, there is refreshment for those who are refreshing others. So I have found that as for example, when we had young kids, I was part of the ministry of Kids Quest at the church. So while we had kids that we were taking to be in Sunday school, I was one of the teachers for that. My thinking was, if I'm contributing to the problem, I should probably contribute to the solution. It seems biblical that I would be ministering. And this would be an example of, if it's time, talent, and treasure, this would be a time example. I'm not gifted necessarily to change diapers and to teach at the kindergarten level. However, I've got a kindergartner, so I'm going to teach that kindergartner level at Kids Quest and be part of that ministry. I'm going to serve others. Now, what I didn't anticipate there is one of the ancillary benefits. If we think about relationships and family, some of my deepest friends came out of ministering at that Kids Quest. I met other parents who had similar aged kids when we were new to that church, because we were ministering and we're called to do that. But there was a social benefit where we connected with others that I was not expecting. So each of these affects all the other areas. In terms of ministry and giving, the tithe, right? Even having a tenth. As I continue to read a little bit deeper, it turns out that there are people that give 90% of their income. I thought, that's pretty amazing. I would love to level up and make a type of income where I can give 90% of what I make and live on 10. Amazing. However, I probably don't have a shot at doing that if I'm not good at giving 10% of whatever I'm making at any season of life. So if I've got an 18-year-old daughter that is making $100 per week, it's important for her to understand the value of giving $10 of that 100 immediately right off the top. Why? Because there's more than enough, and all I have is from God, and he has more than enough. In giving to the church, it demonstrates that net giving philosophy that the Lord is taking care of me. I can give this because he's got me, and it's a matter of faithfulness, not success, when I bring that 10% to the storehouse. But I would say that when I first started doing this, my 10 out of 10 is, hey, if I'm giving 10%, if I'm giving some of my time, and I'm bringing some of my talent to the church, which I'll unpack in just a moment, I'll be winning. I could get to a 10 if I'm giving enough, if I'm serving, let's say leading worship or teaching in the church, and if I'm giving some time, if I'm working at a soup kitchen or changing diapers, whatever the needs are, just giving time, if you will. And as I started to read up on that, there was more available there. There's more that I could do. There was, there isn't, for example, currently a ministry at my church where we have coaching. However, I'm gifted to coach. So if I can bring an opportunity to coach people for free within that church context, that would be an example of giving a portion of my talent. Time, talent, and treasure. So not just my money, but what has the Lord gifted me to do? And am I bringing that to the storehouse as well? Not just the money, but what am I good at? And can I find a way to creatively bring that to our church? So what are some things daily, weekly, monthly, annually, or one time? And simply daily, by the way, one of the things on my list here is it ministry if I'm simply kind to the server that served us today at the restaurant? Is it ministry? Am I brightening life a little bit? Is it a social contribution by using their name, making eye contact, tipping well, not just leaving a scripture reference? Or if I'm going to leave a scripture reference, maybe I should tip a little more, right, with that one to make sure we're going ahead and we're blessing others. Can I do this daily? Kindness is free, and it doesn't cost much to simply be sweet, to be generous emotionally to others. That's one of the daily things that I would have with regards to ministry. One of the things we would talk about as kids, we would pray through as we're driving them to school, we would pray through the armor of God, and the shoes of the gospel of peace was the one we would kick into here, where we said, Lord, if there's an opportunity today to minister, to be Jesus with skin on, to our friends, to a stranger, to our teachers, to our bosses, Lord, would we run quickly with the shoes of the gospel of peace into those openings that you provide for us? Can we minister? Can we serve others, even on a daily basis? I think weekly finding something that we can do within the church context makes a ton of sense. Is there something on Sunday morning, whether it's parking, whether it's teaching, whether it be a time or a talent, what can we do to continually invest back into our church family? Monthly, annually, is there an annual? I know some of the families we talk to, they'll actually go on a family missionary trip. Hey, we're going as a family. We're going for 2 or 3 days. We're going for a week. We're going to build homes, and then we're going to come back, and giving back on a big basis there annually. Is there sometimes just a one-time thing that needs to be done with regards to ministry? I think of Zacchaeus, who had lived not well, sees Jesus, and is like, Lord, look, I've not only have I given back everything I ripped people off, I'm doing this. And it wasn't going to be a monthly thing, but a one-time, hey, I need to give all this back, not to try and buy my way out of this, but as an evidence of fruit of a forgiveness and a wild change in heart there. I'll invite some other thoughts here, Nate and Wayne here, before we step out of the ministry sphere here.
I think I've always got three perspectives when it comes to ministry. One is it allows me to move from being a consumer to an investor in a more holistic way, right? So generosity, we'll talk about generosity later in the financial side of things, but to think beyond just my finances, how am I investing the resources that I have, and how am I adding value into those spaces? I think that's part of it. The second is the one you hinted at, and that is one of the greatest ways to cultivate healthy, dynamic, flourishing relationships is by serving together. Right. So like there is something about a bond that's created as we are investing, giving of ourselves, we're pouring into that. And as a result, we are bonded through that. It's a pretty special dynamic that so many of the closest relationships in my life have come out of serving, ministering together in a very strategic, intentional way. And the third is to be able to look at myself as someone who's a part of a congregation that is serving a local community, that I am investing there. And then looking beyond that to say, where is it? Because I always talk about time, talents, and treasures, but I always add touch, right? Like there's a unique touch that I have to people in my sphere that I can impact if I'm willing to go beyond just writing a check or keeping my hands clean, to stepping into spaces and really giving of myself into those environments. Part of that's going to be in the local church. Part of that's going to be within the larger community or marketplace that I operate in. Where do I get access to be able to impact lives, to love on people, to care for people, invest my time, talents, and treasures into those spaces that I'm uniquely positioned and other people don't have that same access. And so I think for me, it moves my heart. Secondarily, I think it cultivates relationships. And thirdly, it allows me to really leverage at the highest level the unique position that I am and the opportunities that I've been afforded.
I love what you're hitting here, Nate. And specifically what's coming to mind is the importance of being part of a local body of believers, a local church where I'm known and they know me. Not only an opportunity to see a Wayne Wagner stack chairs. That's a really important guy, vacuuming and stacking chairs. That makes an impact, right? On my heart, etc. I've got friends and family that don't necessarily, they identify as being a believer and they're not part of a local church. And they've got various reasons for that. But my encouragement is they're going to be missing out on so much of what you just described. Sure. Not only an opportunity to be blessed by seeing a Wayne Wagner stacking chairs, but also if they've got gifts that the Lord has wired them with, that they're withholding and not bringing to that local church. I might need that touch from them that day. And if they didn't go, I didn't get it, or the other side of that, being blessed to be a blessing. If I didn't go today, somebody might have needed what I had. And I wasn't there to be able to bless them, to be a blessing and to be refreshed, even myself there as well. So that's part of that encouragement too there.
Wayne, before you jump in, one last thought on this. I've spent the last decade pouring into pastors internationally to empower them in those local churches and doing church partnership stuff. And one of the reasons for that is because when the local church is able to function and thrive in the way it's called to, it impacts that community in a more significant way. And so when you're pouring into a local church, other than your own personal family, there is no environment where you're going to have the chance to have multi-generational impact and have the broad sphere of impact than in and through a local church. And Jesus is lifted up. The gospel is showcased in magnificent ways when the local church is thriving and equipped to do its best work within local communities around the world. And we get to be a part of that and use the resources that we have to help facilitate that. Jesus is lifted up in awesome ways when we do that collectively.
Yeah, I think I've got so many images in my head that are coming to the front here. Nate, you just talked about the international side of things, and we have some dear friends who run a ministry in the Philippines and are branching out into Africa and this kind of stuff. And they have a financial curriculum on teaching. They take families that make less than $1 a day and help them multiply that. And they have they've got 20 years worth of data that shows that they can, their 4-month program, families go from having never had any wealth for multiple generations to having an average of about $200 at the end of the 4 months, and then about $2,000 at the end of 5 years. And so, and really creating what in those spheres is first generation, and it's not wealth as we would think about it, but it's first generation, just getting past existing day to day. And what's ironic, they work through 20,000 local churches, and they're getting ready to, they graduated their 2 millionth student this year. And so, in a very real, tangible sense, as their ministry comes and affects the local churches, the local churches become known as they're not preaching a health and wealth gospel, but somehow the people in that church are becoming wealthier as a byproduct of the ministry. And I think that so much of it's just we want to have a vision for the world we want to live in, and then be able to act moment by moment, day by day, in a way that brings that to life. I had an image in my head of, I guess it's been two winters ago. My wife and I were coming home. We stopped at a Wawa, and there's a guy who obviously it's the middle of winter. It's freezing. He's here. He's he's very dirty. He's very evidently high on something. I go inside. The manager from Wawa apologizes to me that this guy's out there. And so on the way out, I pick up a gift card and I go outside. He doesn't have socks. And my wife, I got down and took my shoes off and took my socks off and gave him my socks and a gift card to get food, and then woke him up and let him know, that this is what I want him to do. I want to go get some food and find a place to be able to rest. And my wife is like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I want to live in a world where people don't just step over people like that, where every human life has dignity." And how do we envision that? How do we put ourselves in a community where we can bring that to life, where we can serve one another? I mean, Trent, you talked about me stacking chairs. There's a guy in our church who is a principal in a multi-billion-dollar global ministry, and you will find him in February directing traffic in the parking lot. It is the things that this guy is involved in and responsible for on the daily, the weight and pressure that he has on him on global projects every single day of the week. And yet on Sunday, he shows up with a little orange vest and a little, orange flashlight and says, this way to find your parking spot. So but there is something that goes on when we can show up like that keeps our hearts humble.
Amen.
It keeps our hearts humble. It keeps things in perspective. It helps ward off that there's this old saying that our hearts are an idol factory, right? And we make idols out of everything, starting with the person in the mirror. And, we have to have a theology. We have to have a context. We have to have a group of people around us who they're not there to belittle us. Like, we all grew up with brothers, and we know how brothers can pick on one another. And it's kind of an alpha beta fight every single day. It's not the purpose of belittling. It's the purpose of keeping us grounded, to be good stewards, that we wake up every day tomorrow, not with an entitlement mentality, but with a mentality that we've been given what we have. We are expected to be good stewards, and one day we will give an account.
Amen.
And when we can do that and do that in a context where we can multiply that across and see others doing it alongside of us, it's powerful in our sphere. It's powerful in our community. And I was going to make a joke, Trent, about, Jesus with skin on. Does that mean Jesus walks around without skin on most of the time? But but seriously, I mean, we get to be the hands and feet that we're told to be when we act out our faith on a daily.
Amen.
So, Dan, if we could go back to our slide, the original wheel there. One of the things you just mentioned there, Wayne, was perspective, right? And having, for example, ministry, and I try to make a case for this, and in case we've got some clients, some friends that don't necessarily go to church, would say, well, why would ministry or social contributions be relevant to me? Here would be one of the things that the cases that I would make. As a young 20s entrepreneur, I was kind of like, so went my office and my sales results. That was my personal well-being. If we had a good sales week, I was good. If I had a poor income week, I was not good. And I was really all of my eggs in one basket in terms of my personal okayness, which again is a whole other conversation about where we're putting our faith. But in that, by starting to diversify and getting some perspective that I'm not just a guy that goes to work. I've got 6 different areas that I've got to pay attention to. What I did not anticipate would be some of the benefit of that. So, for example, the perspective shifted when I was investing time in my 20s before I was married at a teen drop-in center, at-risk teens, and just doing time with them, playing pool with teens that might be on the street, might be homeless in some cases, and just spending time with them, loving on them and encouraging them. I remember there was one random time where I'd seen a kid that I'd ministered to years before, just hung out with and was just kind to him, saw him on the metro station in Montreal afterwards. And he told me what a huge difference that time had made for him, that he'd got his life turned around and that he was walking with the Lord. And it was one of those, what I call a paycheck of the soul moments that I was not anticipating. It's not why you do it, but it's also really nice when those happen. And here's what I'll tell you, is it changed how I felt about my sales week that week, which wasn't great. It mattered less. The sales hit I took that week and income I'm like, hey, that's not the only thing that's determining whether I'm okay. If I'm doing good work here, that actually did pressurize me. I think I bounced back quickly with regards to the work, because work wasn't the only thing that I have going on there. Some thoughts that inspired for you there, Nate?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about it from a ministry perspective, it puts you in a position where, again, you're going from being a consumer to an investor, and you're looking for ways to invest what you have and the resources that you have. And ministry is, again, multidimensional. But the other piece of it that I've watched personally over the last probably 15 years of counseling and coaching, and that is when it comes to marriage, when it comes to relationships, one of the things that happens is when money starts to become something that's easier, that we breathe easier, that we're making some money, we're starting to have some significant success. One of the questions that I've had to ask multiple times when I see the stressors on a relationship in married life or whatever else is, what was the plan for the money? What was the plan? And not first and foremost, and Wayne will get into specifically strategically multiplying that, but from the perspective of ministry, so often I've got wives that will say, I wish I could go back to before we had money because life made more sense. Because there wasn't a plan to take that money and actually become an investor, to be somebody who was pouring it back into a local church and into other organizations that were doing good work. And when you don't have that perspective, you don't have eyes on what's happening in the world. So you're not flying close enough to have a heart that's open to that. And B, you're not collectively trying to be more missional in what you're doing. And the truth is, when a ministry is not a strategic part of your overall approach to life, then the finances actually can become counterproductive to the life that you're trying to build. It is so interdependent that I think we've got to have a broad enough perspective to understand what is the plan for the success we're about to have, and how does that further enhance our ability to impact lives and put a dent in the universe the way that we're called to, in and through a local church, and then well beyond that.
And crucial to this conversation, Nate, is that The identity is not the money, and the identity is not the job that generated the money.
Absolutely.
Right. It's those two things, because that's where, I mean, on a pragmatic, rubber meets the road side of things, we talk about financial independence, not retirement. Why? Because people who retire don't have a purpose, don't know what they're going to do tomorrow, and they have shorter life expectancies and smaller impacts in this world. Now, I sat down with a guy this week who works 100-hour weeks and has been doing that for years and years and years, and lives a high pressure, high stress job, and he can't wait to get out. And I understand why he has a mindset of retire.
Sure.
But I'm also saying, all right, 3 years from now, you're going to retire. I need you to have a mindset of what you're going to do and why when you do, because we'll get you out of the 100-hour-a-week rat race. But you have to know, you have to have a vision for what the rest of your life is going to look like. And it can't just be sitting down in the backyard watching the grass grow. It's the identity has got to be bigger. And the, you use the word impact. And that's so true, and it's so deep. We've got to be able to envision a different future, and as wealth comes along, the ability to use that wealth. It does no good sitting in the barn.
Yeah,
right. It does no good, and if you leave it stagnate in the barn, it's not being put to its highest and best use today while you're alive. And there are politicians that are just waiting to get their hands on it when you're gone. And so, to fund their purposes. And so, have a plan, have a mission to use what you've been blessed with. A, be a good steward, and B, pass that on to the next generation.
Trent, before you move on from this, I was just thinking, leaders have three primary responsibilities. First, to define reality as it is. The second is to envision a preferred future. And then the third is to carve out a path to pursue that preferred future. What you're laying in front of us right now is an opportunity to do all three of those. We have to first raise awareness and define reality for the way that it is. Then to envision a preferred future of what this can look like. And then thirdly, what are the things that I need to do to intentionally pursue that preferred future? Leaders are called to do those three things in their every environment they step into. From a business ministry side of it, but it's got to start with my own life and my own family. And if I can do that in my own life, my own family, then when I start to do it outside in those other spaces, there's a far greater impact that can have.
Somebody really smart has said to me repeatedly, if I know, I got a shot.
There you go.
It happens to be Trent Booth. If I'm aware, I've got a shot.
Yeah. Well, what we're trying to do here is raise that awareness, right? Yeah. So if we utilize this wheel as a tool to raise awareness in terms of where we're at. And one of the analogies, part of the reason we're calling this Mapping 2025, is the GPS. So regardless of the app that I'm using, when I pull it up, it first of all has to find me. Where's the blue dot? And that's where things are at right now. And of course, where we've been certainly affects where we're at right now. Sure. So taking a snapshot in terms of where we are. But that's not the only thing we're looking for here. We got a red pin we're going to drop somewhere. That red pin is where we want to go. Yeah. So that's the desired outcome. That's the plan. We've mentioned a couple times here the last few moments here. So we're going to plant that. And then the next piece is the miracle piece. That is the strategy. What's the plan? And we're going to be flexible with that. Here's my preferred route that doesn't have tolls and is fastest. And if there's an accident there, I'm flexible and I'm going to change the route, recalculate, and figure out a way to still get to that red pin. If I mix analogies here for just a moment, reportedly airplanes are off course as much as 98% during any given flight. Absolutely. Now, I took off on Tuesday morning from Orlando towards Philadelphia, and I'm really grateful when we were blown off course that the pilot didn't come back on and say, hey, we're going to Michigan, as much as I love Michigan. Instead, hey, we've been blown off course, so we're going to Michigan instead. No, they course correct as they go. So we still landed in Philadelphia. And the pilot's job is to course correct. Our job is to be aware of where we are, knowing where we're going, and then to come up with a great strategy for that. Please utilize this tool. I'm going to walk through some other labels and put a bow on my time here with regards to the Wheel of Life. So let's go back to that slide here, and then we're going to hand things over to Nate. So the wheel slide where we've got the different labels, I just want to briefly unpack what the other labels could mean. So for example, when we've got the family section, a lot of times people ask, well, where's the relationships? Like, where's my friends? I would put that all under family, right? So we've got basically your relationship section, if you will. Christy and I have lived in the Philadelphia area, New Jersey, for over 20 years. There's the family we're born into that we share DNA with, And then there's the family we choose. And in many cases, not only is Wayne a brother for me, a brother from another mother, but some that we've gone deep with. I've got more FaceTime with Wayne than my actual DNA brothers over the last several years. So the family you choose matters. But not just that. We're going to go deeper dive into some of those relationships, but that's where I would take stock of how we're doing with those robust relationships. Finances is relatively self-explanatory, but I love the questions that Wayne's going to walk us through in a little bit. Physical health, we are also going to cover that in just a little bit. Education, vocation might be one that we're talking about this entire time without necessarily putting an exclamation point on it. This is personal development. This is growth. This is, yes, my current career, my current job, if you will. But, this is not the 80s. Many of us will have 2 or 3 different careers over a lifetime, not just different companies that we might work for, which was my dad's generation, or my grandfather's generation. He worked for Procter & Gamble for 42 years. Not only one career, one profession, one company, on top of all that. Well, in our case, those days are gone. I was 30 years at Cutco Cutlery, but it's very rare, at this point that you see somebody that's just 50 that's been at a company for 30 years. And even then, I've retired from Cutco. Education, vocation is, what am I here on this earth for? What am I here to do? What am I doing informally in terms of education to level up? What are my thoughts and philosophies on education, not just for me, but for my kids? How am I continually interacting with big ideas, vitamins for the mind, and leveling up with regards to my education and my vocation, the things that I'm designed to do? Asking questions like, Lord, I've 3 kids that have graduated high school in the last 5 years, and asking the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what are you going to go to school for? Big questions that I wish that more people were walking their kids through a wheel of life and started to ask that question more earlier, but a different version of that question. What do you love doing? What do you feel you can contribute to the world? And let's find a way to monetize that. So education, vocation, consider that the personal growth area, formal education, let's say like college or going for an MBA, etc. Coaching, I think, would be part of that. Am I reading? What is my philosophy? So one of our panelists here, Wayne Wagner's read over 50 books in a year. And it wasn't just 1 year. So to encourage you, he's got a very robust philosophy on what he should be doing to be leveling up on a personal growth basis. Of course, that education, vocation, that one thing affects your job. It affects your income. It affects your health, and so on and so forth. So the labels that we were mostly missing there, I think, were the education, vocation, and the family piece. My encouragement to people is to take some time working on this. Invest an hour just as an overview. The deeper dive, an hour on each section, isn't inappropriate. In fact, that probably still won't be enough time to fully even document all that you believe in that one area and the areas that you really want to grow in. That said, it's going to be a really good start, especially if you're planning to revisit it in Q1 of 2025, for you to start to look at narrowing the gap in terms of what I feel called to do, what I think a perfect 10 would look like, what the Lord is asking me to do, and my current behavior, and starting to narrow the gap and utilizing this tool to be able to start doing that. So strategically, with regards to time of the year, as you get deep into November, early December, makes a lot of sense for us to take stock of the previous year and to look into the next year coming up. One final encouragement before I hand things over here to Nate, and that would be, don't let what you can't do prevent you from doing what you can. And
Absolutely.
I'm paraphrasing John Wooden with that one, but I'm saying, hey, there's a version of this that I wish at some point I could do.
Sure.
For example, a family might say, listen, bringing 10% right now, tithe would crush us. I would say, well, what number can you start with? And let's start giving something. People might say, well, finances, I can't start giving full contribution to that 401k right now, or I can't start doing the full Roth contribution. I would say, well, let's not worry about what the max is. What can you start with today? Even something, and do not dismiss the value of even little moments. Somebody might say, well, Trent, I don't have the 12 minutes that Nate's promoting daily to get into my faith. I'm going to say, well, how much time could you give? You're busy, but you got 5, don't you? Absolutely. If you were to just pray for 5, don't take my word for it. Test me. Test the Lord. You spend
Absolutely.
5 minutes praying a day. Tell me that the rest of these other circles or spheres don't improve, don't get better, don't get pushed up to a 6 or 7, maybe even 8 or a 9 there. So do what you can while you can, and see if that doesn't help you out there. So Wheel of Life, Thoughts, gentlemen, before we move into Nate? Anything else we need to do here with a general overview?
I was just going to say maybe for just a minute here, the goal of this whole webinar is to answer the question. All right, I see what you guys are doing. I've asked you for your reading book. You talk about taking 2 days at the end of a year, the beginning of a year, to plan the year ahead, to do evaluation. Like, I don't even know what I do with 2 days sitting in a room by myself with a journal. Like, what would I actually do? And what we've just covered in the last hour is, this is a half day easily of charting out where I am, evaluative metrics of where I am, and then starting to think about and dream about and envision where would I like to be a year from now. And then the rest of the time comes back to going deeper into these categories, deeper into the specific behaviors and actions that I can or should be taking over the course of the next year. But that's what this webinar really is to help us develop a track to run on. And we're going to put out some of the slides, some of the content here along with this webinar to be able to give you a bit of a format, a bit of a formula for, if I'm going to take two days to plan the year to come, how do I spend that time? And how do I make the most value bring the most value out of that time? So,
and here's been my experience as I've guided dozens of people without hyperbole through this exercise over the last 25 years. Every minute you invest into this exercise comes back.
Yeah.
It's an investment of time.
Yeah.
You can't convince me that you articulating what you believe in the biggest 6 areas of life is going to be a waste of time. It shocks me that we learn things like trigonometry in school and not this, not what I believe or our family core values. Yeah. When you've gone through this, you've now articulated what is important to you. How does life work? And what do I need to do to win at life? This, in my mind, is an absolutely essential, basic thing in terms of personal leadership and growth to be able to advance the plot on. Without this, I don't know what else we're doing. I'll put it that way. So, but I'm trying to answer the question, why don't people do this? Is I wonder, well, if I invest 2 days in this and it doesn't change, I've set goals before and I've missed them. And my life is fine on a day-to-day. So we're asking probably the wrong question with why should I bother doing this? My encouragement would be invest the time, at least even a half day in this, and see if you don't organically, naturally start to self-regulate and start to narrow the gap, start doing extra things that I know I ought to do. In my experience, we're either spinning up or down in that area. There's no neutral. I'm either pursuing growth and I'm getting better in those areas, or I am decaying with atrophy, eventually getting to a point where I'm not good, right? So let's start to engage in the battle to start to level up and grow in each of the areas. One final thought, and that is that people ask me, should I start on the area I'm worst in or best in? I'm like, you choose. Dealer's choice, right? Now, listen, I've got people that are like, hey, my faith one is so bad right now. I've got to address this one. I'll be like, yeah, that's hard to argue. Start there. There's probably, if you're a 2 right now, here's the encouragement. If any of you gave yourself a really low score, it's probably because there are some very basic things that if you were to just start doing them, you could improve that by 2 or 3 numbers today. Or sometimes by the end of the week, you could go from a deuce to a 5. So my encouragement is, let's spend less time armchair quarterbacking what I did to get into this mess. We're not done. Hopefully you'll never be a 2 again, now that you're aware. But that said, is start to do the work today. Let's invest more time thinking about how we can get that to a 5 to a 7. Right. And less time beating myself up over how we got here necessarily.
There's the old story of the old man goes in the backyard and the little boy is sitting out there at night with a BB gun and he's shooting at the moon. And he's just shooting shot after shot after shot after shot. And the old man is, what are you doing, boy? He's like, I'm shooting at the moon. And the old man says, you're a fool. You are never going to hit the moon from here. And he looked at the old man and he said, I'm getting a heck of a lot closer than you are. And that's don't be discouraged to start wherever you are. And again, Trent, you said it, that, we don't need to dwell a whole lot. There's time for counseling to go back and say, how did I get here? So that's kind of the counseling piece of the evaluative metric. This is a, where am I where am I trying to get to, and what's the path and decisions and actions I need to take to get there.
And the counseling piece usually comes in if you can't figure out how to get traction moving forward.
Yeah.
So if you can evaluate it and then you can move forward, you might be in a place where counseling is not necessary. It's one of the key factors when you're trying to decide, do I really need to go see a professional? Can I get traction or not? And this evaluative process, I think, can help to define that.
Absolutely.
So we're off to a rocket start here, friends. Some of you are going, man, I wish we were going to spend more time in finances and physical health and relationships. Oh, just you wait. We've got Nate Wagner about to do a deeper dive into some of the physical dimension of things here. And with that, Nate, I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks for listening today. For Nate Wagner's episode on the high-impact marriages, tune in next week. If you missed last week's episode on financial vision for families, make sure you stop by there as well.
Thank you for listening to the Envision More podcast with Wayne Wagner Jr. of Visionary Wealth Management. We hope you were encouraged and inspired by the conversation today. If you want to dig deeper into the show notes or Wayne's work at Visionary, you can find us at envisionmore.com. That's Envision with a Z. Advisory services are provided through Wealth Plan Investment Management. Wealth Plan Investment Management and Visionary Wealth Management are separate entities. The content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. Thanks for listening.